Welcome to the second of 5 video lectures on William Shakespeare's history play, Henry IV, Part 1. In this video lecture, I will work through the 4 scenes of Act 2, which begin with and address the robbery that we set up in Act 1, that work through the relationship between Hotspur and his wife, Kate, and then conclude with the wonderful tavern scene, the very long tavern scene, in which we, in the culmination, see Falstaff and Prince Hal take turns playing the king, playing Henry IV, and which lead very nicely into the moments we'll see in Act 3, where we do see King Henry again interacting with Prince Hal. All right, let's get started. Act 2, Scene 1, is a short scene. It's an interesting scene in that it lets us have a glimpse into the everyday life of this medieval world. For the most part, yes, we've seen everyday life in the tavern, and we're going to see a lot of that. And we've seen the sort of the high aristocratic life surrounding King Henry. Here, though, we see a little different perspective of everyday life. And the language in the beginning of this scene is quite difficult. Oftentimes, with Shakespeare's prose, and when we have the jargon of everyday language, there's a lot of vernacular. There's a lot that's very difficult to understand. And this is probably some of the most difficult language for us in the 21st century to understand. Let's take a look at just a few lines to illustrate what I mean. So Act 2, Scene 1, we've got these carriers, the men who are going to soon be robbed, and they're talking with a hostler. A hostler is a horse handler or a groom. And let's listen to their language. Act 2, Scene 1, Line 1. Hey ho! And it be not for by the day I'll be hanged. Charles Wayne is o'er the new chimney, and yet our horse not packed. What, hostler? Anon. I prithee, Tom, beat cut saddle, put a few flocks in the point. Poor Jade is wrung in the withers out of all cess. That is definitely, the footnotes help. What on earth are they talking about? They're getting their horses ready. They're upset with the hostler. He hasn't got the horse ready yet. The first carrier's upset about that. And some of this is just tough. Charles Wayne is o'er the new chimney. If you were in Shakespeare's time, you would know that Charles Wayne refers to a constellation. We call it the Big Dipper in the 21st century. So when I say Charles Wayne is over the new chimney, I'm looking up into the sky. It tells me it's nighttime if I'm an audience member, because you can see the constellations, you can see the stars. Charles Wayne, this constellation, this Big Dipper, is over the new chimney. Gives a sense of the time of the night as well. So Shakespeare is establishing this, but for us in the 21st century, that's tough. And a lot of these first lines from Act 2, Scene 1, are a puzzle to put together. Use your footnotes, you can figure out some of it. But really, the magic of it on stage isn't about being able to understand exactly what they're hearing, as much as it is about just simply hearing and enjoying the language, the sound, the rhythm of this old style of speech, these old mannerisms, these old colloquialisms that we don't hear today. Enjoy them, savor them, but it's not really necessary to understand everything that these folks are saying to one another. Now Gadshill comes in. We heard about Gadshill briefly in Act 1. Gadshill comes in. He has some questions for the carriers. They don't trust him, though. They think he's a thief. Well, they're right. He is a thief. Although they think he's about to steal their lanterns from them. Not at all. He has a much bigger purpose. They won't talk to him. They won't have much to do with him because they don't trust him, rightfully so. So he talks to the Chamberlain after they leave. And the Chamberlain gives him some really important information. Turn to line 43, still Act 2, Scene 1. Line 43, the Chamberlain says to Gadshill, Good morrow, Master Gadshill. It holds current that I told you yesternight. There's a Franklin is a farmer, in the Weald of Kent. Weald is a forest, so there's a farmer from the forest of Kent. Had brought 300 marks with him in gold. That's a lot of gold. That's a lot of money. I heard him tell it to one of his company last night at supper, a kind of auditor. One that hath abundance of charge, too. God knows that. They're up already and call for eggs and butter. They will away presently. this information that Gadshill is collecting, he's going to report back to Poins, to the Prince, to Falstaff, to Peto, to the others, Bardolph, going to report this information back, and they're going to use it here in a few moments later in the act in the robbery. Jump to Act 2, Scene 2, and now we see the other characters. So Gadshill is gathering the intelligence they need for the robbery, and then we have, and remember too, from Act 1, this is a robbery, but Poins and the Prince aren't planning to participate directly. Remember from Act 1, they're going to participate indirectly. They're going to wait for Falstaff and Gadshill and Peto and Bardolph to commit the robbery. Then they're going to rob the thieves. And it's a wonderful bit of comedy here in this scene. Falstaff, at the beginning of Act 2, Scene 2, is upset. His horse is missing. His horse is missing because Poins has played yet another practical joke and hidden his horse from him. Falstaff says in line 9, "I am accursed to rob in that thief's company." Great sense of irony that this thief is mad at another thief for having stolen from him or for having hidden his horse. "The rascal hath removed my horse and tied him I know not where. If I travel but 4 foot by the square further a foot, if I have to walk 4 more feet, it's going to kill me." Because of course, Falstaff is a big, heavy man, not in the best of shape. He can't even walk 4 feet. "I shall break my wind. Well, I doubt not, but to die a fair death for all this. If I escape hanging for killing that rogue," he's going to kill Poins for having hidden his horse, "I have forsworn his company hourly any time this 22 years. Last 22 years, I said I don't want anything to do with Poins, and yet I am bewitched with the rogue's company." And then the Prince, Poins suddenly show up, and they tell Falstaff, quiet down. Why are you making so much noise just before the robbery?" Now remember, they're going to be here for a moment, but then they're going to make their exit and leave Falstaff and the others to commit the robbery. Hal says, line 24, "Peace, ye fat guts, lie down. Lay thine ear close to the ground and listen, if thou canst hear the tread of travelers." They have a great relationship, Hal and Falstaff, and even though Falstaff is going to be the butt of this joke, Falstaff's always the butt of the joke, but Falstaff plays along as well. Prince Hal gives him these hooks that then Falstaff can make a self-deprecating joke about, and they're beautiful when done on stage, and they also show sort of the connection in terms of language that they have. So the Prince says, lay your ear close to the ground and listen for the sound of hoofs coming, the sound of horses. Falstaff, he's a big man, an old man. If he lays on the ground, he can't get up. So he has this great line 26. "Have you any levers to lift me up again, being down?" Yeah, wonderful when done on. How am I going to get back up if I lay down on the ground and listen? I can't do that. I'm too fat, too old. So even Falstaff plays with this, and Hal sets it up beautifully. Gadshill comes running on, line 42. Casey, on with your visors, on with your masks. There's money of the king's coming down the hill. 'Tis going to the king's exchequer. So they're on their way. The men are on their way. They have the money. It's on the way to the exchequer, to the treasury, to the king's exchequer. Falstaff's got a great play on the words there. "You lie, you rogue. 'Tis going to the king's tavern. There's enough to make us all to be hanged." Then here's where Hal sets up why they're not going to be right there with Falstaff when the robbery happens with Falstaff and the other three. It says, "Sirs, you 4 shall front them in the narrow lane. Ned Poins and I will walk lower. If they escape from your encounter, then they light on us. So you're going to be up here to commit the robbery. If they escape from you, we'll be waiting for them just a little lower." And they use that, Poins and Hal, to exit. They exit the stage and leave the other 4 to commit the robbery, which they do. They commit the robbery, and then immediately after they commit the robbery, after the 4 rob those carriers that we met briefly in the previous scene, then out jump Poins, out jumps Hal. They rob the 4 of them, and the language here, when Hal summarizes at the very end of the scene, gives us an idea of what happens on stage. There has to be some creativity to it, but the point is it should be funny. Hal and Poins should scare Falstaff and the other three, they go running off in separate directions, and especially Falstaff has to be, you want this to be funny when he runs away. You want him, that same kind of self-deprecating humor he has in his language, here he gets to do it with his body in some way. The very end of the scene, Act 2, Scene 2, Hal says, Falstaff sweats to death and lards the lean earth as he walks along. He sweats to death. He sweats from running. He lards the lean earth the same way that lard or fat might drip off of, a turkey that's basting. Same way sweat is dripping off Falstaff. Remember, just a few lines ago, Falstaff, if I had to run 4 more feet, it would be the end of me. Here he is running in terror because he's been robbed. And then there's an interesting line, depending on what the actor does with it, that I really like. Were it not for laughing, I should pity him. Now, that could be a joke. There doesn't have to be anything serious in it. But at the same time, there's this sense that Prince Hal knows who he is, and he knows who Falstaff is. And he's a prince, and Falstaff is a fat old man who... He's likable, he's funny, but in a sense, he's sort of wasted his life, too. Were it not for laughing, I should pity him. And then Poins has no pity at all. How the fat rogue roared. Great alliteration there. How the fat rogue roared. You can hear the R sound repeated there. Quite lovely. Act 2, Scene 3, we switch, and we go to the north. And this is a scene, it starts with just Hotspur. And this is a moment, too, where we meet Lady Percy, or Kate. Kate is the first female character we meet in Henry IV, Part 1, and perhaps the most intriguing of female characters, even though her part is short. A wonderful, wonderful creation. This particular, the Henry VI plays have some really rich, strong female characters. The Henry IV plays less so. But here's one example of a really interesting, though albeit a very small part of a female character in Lady Percy. The scene opens, Act 2, Scene 3, with Hotspur reading a letter that he's received. We don't know who the letter's from, but the letter is from somebody he's asked to join him. Remember, Hotspur is joining with his father. His father's Northumberland, and his uncle Worcester. They're joining together with Douglas and Owen Glendower and York, and they're going to join together to take on Henry IV. This is the big battle scene that we're waiting for at the end. The whole play is culminating to. Well, whoever's written this letter to Hotspur isn't going to join them. He doesn't want to join them. Nope. Hotspur he's reading this letter. If you've read Macbeth, this is similar to Lady Macbeth reading her letter. So reading parts of it out loud from the letter and then commenting on the letter as the scene continues. Now so he starts off reading the letter. But for mine own part, my lord, I could be well contented to be there in respect of the love that I bear your house. He could be contented? Why is he not then? In respect of the love he bears our house, he shows that he loves his own barn better than he loves our house. Let me see some more. The purpose you undertake is dangerous? Why, that's certain. 'Tis dangerous to take a cold, to sleep, to drink. But I tell you, my lord fool, out of this nettle, danger, we pluck this flower, safety. The purpose you undertake is dangerous. The friends you have named uncertain. The time itself unsordid. And your whole plot too light for the counterpoise of so great an opposition? Say you so? I say unto you again, you are a shallow, cowardly hind, and you lie. What a lack brain is this? So he's going on. He's just railing. He's alone in the room. He's the only person on stage in this moment, and he's just railing. This is a great passage for the actor who gets to play Hotspur to really enjoy this, really have fun with it. But it also is an important plot device because this letter is reminding us what we learned in Act 1 of who these characters are. Characters we haven't met on stage yet, but the characters who at the end of the play are going to join together with Hotspur, join together with Hotspur's father Northumberland, join together with his uncle Worcester, and are going to combine their forces to take on Henry IV. And by that time, Henry V will have grown up just a little bit, not in terms of age, but in terms of maturity, and will also join his father on the battlefield. So we're all working toward that climax. All of a sudden, in comes Lady Percy, though. Kate. Her name is Kate. In actual history, her name wasn't Kate. I forget off the top of my head what her name was, but Shakespeare's played with the history a little bit here. He's played around a little bit, too, with Edmund Mortimer, conflating a couple of different historical characters to make it a little bit simpler. Kate, the reason he chooses Kate as a name is interesting, too, because he has some other Kates you might be familiar with. If you read Taming of the Shrew, there's a Kate there, and A Love's Labour's Lost, there's a Kate. His Kates tend to be characters who have some spirit in them, strong female characters with some real spirit who are willing to stand up to their husbands. Lady Percy, Kate, this Kate, is no exception. And she comes out and she said, "What on earth are you talking about? You're talking to yourself to this letter. You've been ignoring me the last fortnight, the last 2 weeks. What is going on?" This is line 27. Lady Percy says, "Oh my good lord, why are you thus alone? For what offense have I this fortnight, these past 2 weeks, been a banished woman from my Harry's bed? Tell me, sweet lord, what is it that takes from thee thy stomach, pleasure, and thy golden sleep?" Hotspur's not going to tell Lady Percy what's going on. He doesn't trust her enough, or their relationship is complex. Maybe it's not that he doesn't trust her enough as much as he doesn't trust any woman enough to reveal this information. So he's not giving her the specifics. But Lady Percy's smart. She can figure it out. She knows what's going on. Jump down to line 70. She says, "I know your business, Harry." Line 70 and those 4 lines that follow. "I'll know your business, Harry, that I will. I fear my brother Mortimer," and that's Edmund Mortimer, who has a legitimate claim to the throne. Perhaps, depending on how we look at the lineage, he has a better claim to the throne, a better tie as the great-grandson to Edward III, perhaps better than even Henry has, than King Henry IV has. "I fear my brother Mortimer does stir about his title, and has sent for you to line his enterprise. But if you go..." Hotspur tries to interrupt her, but it doesn't work. He gets one little line, and then she comes, Come, you parakeeto, you parrot, you little parrot. Come, you parakeeto, answer me directly unto this question that I ask. In faith, I'll break thy little finger, Harry, and if thou wilt not tell me all things true." So there's this great bit of stage business. So the implied direction is she's grabbed him by the little finger, and she's bending it backwards, and she's saying, "I will break your little finger if you don't tell me." And so on stage, you got to have an actress who does that and is threatening to break his finger. And you can see this great moment. Hotspur's a warrior. He's won this big battle that we talked about in Act 1. And here he is, but his wife has physical control over him, at least for a moment. So Lady Percy, it's a small part, but it's a wonderful part on stage. And in the end, though, it doesn't work. He's not going to reveal the plot to her. Line 104 to end the scene, Hotspur says, "Not an inch further, but hark you, Kate, whither I go, wherever I go, thither shall you go too." Thither means there shall you. So where I go, there you shall go too. "Not an inch further, but hark you, Kate, whither I go, thither shall you go too. Today I will set forth, tomorrow you. Will this content ye, Kate?" No, not really, but she says it must, of force. So she gives in. He wins, in a sense, this battle over whether or not he'll tell her about the plot. She already knows what the plot is. She's smart. She knows. She wants him to tell her, and he won't. Act 2, Scene 4. Back to the tavern business. In Act 2, Scene 4, it's a long scene. It's the longest scene in this whole play. In fact, it's the longest scene in Henry IV Part 1 or Part 2. It's a long scene, and there's a lot that happens. Really, we can break it into 3 parts. The first part of the scene, we've got Poins, and we've got the prince, and they're back at the tavern in Eastcheap. And actually, this is the first time we've seen the tavern at Eastcheap. This is a really central. This tavern scene is quite beautiful, but also quite comic and a lot of fun to do on stage. And there are so many choices you have to make as actors in this scene. So many opportunities for a director to get playful and do some really fun things here. All right, so the first part of the scene is just Poins and Prince Hal, and they're the only ones who've arrived back. And remember, they've got all that money. They're the ones who ended up with the money because Falstaff and the others left it behind. And they're having a little bit of fun with this waiting boy, this waiting man named Francis. And they sit on opposite ends of the room, and they each take turns calling Francis back and forth. So a nice bit of comic humor here as they keep calling for Francis, and Francis has to run from one side of the tavern back to the other. And then, though, we have Falstaff and the others finally get to the tavern afterward. So there's this playful moment, and it's going to just continue to get more playful. The tavern's a really interesting space to think about theatrically, but also in terms of Hal's development. And it's this interesting space where he can be this other version of himself, a version he can't be later in the play, a version he certainly cannot be when he becomes king later in the play Henry V. But here he gets to be someone just a little bit different. So we see that with Poins, and here we see it again. Now Falstaff comes storming in, and he's incredibly upset that Poins and that the Prince Hal abandoned them and left them. It was supposed to be the six of them, but it only ended up being four, and he calls them cowards. There's this great exchange between them. Now, how you play this is interesting, because you can have Falstaff and Hal literally, going head to head and being a little bit angry with each other. No matter what, they're not completely angry. There's a level of play here. There has to be a level of play, and it can be all play. It might all just be simply playfulness, but there's also a little bit of tension that we feel forming just beneath the surface, and how much tension you decide to do as a director can vary. I like the idea of keeping it more on the playful side until the very end. Some directors have that tension show up a little earlier, even in these lines. Line 110, Act 2, Scene 4, line 110. Falstaff is really laying on the insults here to Prince Hal and to Poins for having abandoned them, for being cowards, he says. A king's son? If I do not beat thee out of thy kingdom with a dagger of lath, and drive all thy subjects afore thee like a flock of wild geese, I'll never wear hair on my face. No, you, Prince of Wales? Why, you hoarse and round man, what's the matter? All of these references to his fatness, you round man. Falstaff asks right directly to the prince, are not you a coward? Answer me to that. And Poins there? Poins isn't going to have this either, so he calls him fat too. Zounds, you fat punch! And you call me coward? By the Lord, I'll stab thee. I'll call thee coward. This is Falstaff. I'll see thee damned ere I call thee coward, but I would give £1,000 I could run as fast as you canst. You are straight enough in the shoulders. You care not who sees your back. If in a battle, if someone sees your back, it means you're running away. If you take wounds in the back, it means you took wounds while you were running away. It's a shameful thing to turn your back in a battle. You care not who sees your back. Call you that backing of your friends? A plague upon such backing! Give me them what will face me. Give me a cup of sack. I'm a rogue if I drunk today. So he has this pause in his tirade to have a drink. He goes on, he says, we robbed these men, but then we were robbed. There was a band, and this is where it gets really funny. The math and the numbers get really funny here, too. There were 100 men. There was only two. It was only Prince Hal and Poins. There were 100 men, Falstaff says, who came and they robbed us of this £1,000. We also know it's only 300. It's not 1,000. But everything with Falstaff's an exaggeration here. Now, what's fun to do as a director, you have to think, does Falstaff know that he's exaggerating? Or is he really just exaggerating? Falstaff loves this kind of self-deprecating humor. He doesn't mind if someone calls him fat. He doesn't care if you call him old. He doesn't care if you call him a whoremaster. He revels in it. So maybe he's just reveling in making up these numbers he's about to do here. Or maybe he just gets lost in his own exaggerations. But he says 100 men tried to rob me. And the prince is like, So I hope you didn't kill any of them. Because, of course, robbing is one thing. That can get you hung. But killing is even worse, a more serious offense. Line 154, Prince Hal says, pray God you've not murdered some of them. And here's pay attention to the numbers. Falstaff says, nay, that's past praying for. I've peppered 2 of them. I've killed 2 of those men. 2, I'm sure I have paid. 2 rogues in buckram suits. I tell thee what, Hal, if I tell thee a lie, spit in my face, call me hoarse. Thou knowest my old ward. Here I lay, and thus I bore my point. And he does his demonstration of how he took his sword and killed 2 of these men who robbed them. And then he goes on, and then he gets lost in 4 rogues in buckram let drive at me. Wait, 4? It went from 2 to 4. The Prince Hal notices. What, 4? That says but 2 even now. 4, hell, I told thee 4. Poins, aye, he said 4. He didn't, he said 2. But they're just egging him on here, egging him on to keep going. These 4 came all up front and mainly thrust at me. I made no more ado, but took all their 7 points in my target. 7? Why, there were before even now. In buckram? Aye, 4 in buckram suits. 7! By these hilts, or I am villain else. Prithee, let him alone. We shall have more anon. Dost thou hear me, Hal? Aye. Mark thee too, Jack. Do so, for it is worth the listening to. I love that line. It is worth the listening to. Do so, for it is worth the listening to. These 9 in buckram that I told you, and Prince Hal here has, so 2 more already? Their points being broken, down fell their hose. So Prince Hal and Poins are sort of on the side having this conversation. And you get to play whether Falstaff hears this or whether it's just an aside for the audience to hear. Begin to give me ground, but I followed me close. Came in foot in hand with a thought. 7 of the 11 I paid. And so 2, 4, 7, 11. Prince Hal, oh, monstrous. 11 buckram men grown out of 2. Great. That when done right on stage, the audience is just cracking up. They love it. This is Falstaff and Prince Hal at their best. All right. Here, though, Prince Hal tells the truth. And he says, it was us. We were the ones who came. And the great part of, and the best part of the jest was watching you run away from this. And I've caught you in your lie. Falstaff tries to say, well, I knew it was you the whole time. And who am I, a lion, to attack the true prince? So he's got this he tries to cover up for himself, but by this point, it's clear that there's some playfulness. Now, they're doing this, and as they're talking, there's this a knock comes at the door, and Falstaff goes to answer to find out what's happening. So I said at the beginning that in some ways the tavern represents this place where Prince Hal can be this other version of himself, but the outside keeps intruding. Literally, both in this scene. This is the first of 2 times that the tavern scene will be interrupted by an outsider. But also figuratively in the sense that he's being called upon to mature, to become who he is going to be when he becomes Henry V. Falstaff goes and answers the door, and he comes back, and he says that there are men come from your father. There's war brewing. And remember, in the last scene, we saw Hotspur getting talking about the armies that were gathering together in the north to face off against King Henry. And so Falstaff says, hey, there's these men coming. And he says, you are called back to go report to your father first thing in the morning to get ready to be part of these wars, which will, as I mentioned before, become the climax. But Falstaff has a suggestion. He says, before you go back, let's role play a little bit. Let's role play, and I will pretend to be your father, you pretend to be you, and let's go over what you're going to say and do tomorrow. Line 297. Falstaff says, well, thou wilt be horribly chid tomorrow when thou comes to thy father. If you love me, practice an answer. And so they do. Falstaff sets himself up on a cushion, crowns himself with some sort of fake crown, I think it's a cushion maybe on his head is the crown, this dagger, my scepter, and he says, I'll play the father's part. And wonderful, wonderful humor here. Falstaff, jumping down to line 326, here's Falstaff pretending to be King Henry, chiding Prince Hal. Shall the son of England prove a thief and take person a question to be asked? There is a thing, Harry, which thou hast often heard of. It is known to many in our land by the name of pitch. This pitch, as ancient writers do report, doth defile. So doth the company thou keepest. Well, Falstaff says, all the company you keep is bad, except for that one guy, Falstaff. This is great. For Harry, now I do not speak to thee in drink, but in tears, not in pleasure, but in passion, not in words, but in woes only. And yet there is a virtuous man whom I've often found noted in thy company, but I know not his name. And the prince plays along. What manner of man, and it like your majesty? Oh, goodly, portly man, heavier set man, even Falstaff, again playing a joke on his own weight. A goodly, portly man, of faith, and a corpulent, and of a cheerful look, a pleasing eye, and a most notable carriage, and as I think his age some 50, or by Our Lady inclining to 80. So at 50, he's well over 50, inclining to three score. Three score is 60. Score is 20. 3 times 20 is 60. Or inclining to three score. And now I remember his name is. And in most of the productions, he doesn't actually say his own name. He sets it up and he lets the audience who's watching, the other patrons in the Eastcheap Tavern, say it. His name is, and they all shout, Falstaff! Is that man, if that man should be lewdly given, he deceiveth me, for Harry, I see virtue in his looks. If then the tree may be known by the fruit, as the fruit by the tree, then peremptorily I speak it. There is virtue in that. And they all shouted again, Falstaff! Him keep with, the rest banish. And tell me now, thou naughty varlet, tell me, where hast thou been this month? And at this point, the Prince Hal says, enough, let's switch spots. I'll be the king, you be me. So they switch spots, and this time he's gonna rail on Falstaff. And this is where this is where it gets a little bit more serious, I think. As this speech develops, Prince Hal says some things that are true. Perhaps he says them in jest, but even he recognizes, I think, the truth of what he's saying about the company he keeps and about his responsibility to the kingdom to, if not to keep better company, to take his responsibilities more seriously than he is when he's with this company, with when he's hanging out at taverns and when he's hanging out with Falstaff and Poins and Bardolph. Line 355. This is the prince pretending to be his father. Swearest thou, ungracious boy? Henceforth ne'er look on me. Thou art violently carried away from grace. There is a devil, referring to Falstaff, there is a devil haunts thee in the likeness of an old fat man. A ton of man is thy companion. Why dost thou converse with that trunk of humours, that bolting hutch of baseliness, that swollen parcel of dropsies, that huge bombard of sack, that stuffed cloak bag of guts, that roasted Manning tree ox? And you can hear all these insults pile up, and the patrons of Eastcheap who are listening to this little play are just loving it as Falstaff is insulted. Falstaff is probably loving it as he's insulted. He revels in this. With the pudding of his belly, that reverend vice, that grey iniquity, that father ruffian, that vanity in years. Wherein is he good but to taste sack and drink? What good is he for other than drinking? He's of no good to you. Wherein neat and cleanly but to carve a capon and eat it? Wherein cunning but in craft? Wherein crafty but in villainy? Wherein villainous but in all things? Wherein worthy but in nothing? So he's just raided Falstaff. And Falstaff has this great moment. I would your grace take me with you. Whom means your grace? I have no idea who you're talking about. Everyone in the room knows who Prince Hal is talking about. He's talking about Falstaff, but yet I don't know who you mean. Who could you mean, your grace? And then that villainous, abominable misleader of youth, Falstaff, and probably most productions too. It's great. Get the audience. That villainous, abominable misleader of youth. Everyone shouted out, Falstaff! And the third time they shout out Falstaff. That old white-bearded Satan. Oh, my lord, I know the man. I know thou dost. And then he goes on to say, he's not so bad. Falstaff tries to defend himself a little bit. And at the end of this, he says, if you're going to banish some of my friends, remember, he's speaking as Prince Hal in this role play. No, jump down to line 377, about halfway through Falstaff's defense. No, my good lord. Banish Peto. Banish Bardolph. Banish Poins, but for sweet Jack Falstaff, kind Jack Falstaff, true Jack Falstaff, valiant Jack Falstaff, and therefore more valiant being as he is old Jack Falstaff. Banish not him thy Harry's company. Banish not him thy Harry's company. Banish plump Jack, and banish all the world. And their play is about to be interrupted, and Prince Hal only gets 2 lines. But he knows eventually in life, soon, he does need to banish Falstaff from his company. He needs to grow up. He needs to take responsibility and become the prince he's supposed to be. And it's going to be soon because there's a war starting. And he says, I will. And then in the moment here, he's still playing his father, but in a sense, we're seeing inside him again. And it's that other voice, that same voice that ended Act 1. We're hearing it again in Act 2 of him, the more serious side. At this point, they're interrupted again Falstaff would like to keep doing the play. He's not done. He's got more to say. He wants to defend himself more, maybe even more seriously this time, and not just as a jest. 386. He says, "Play out the play. I have much to say in the behalf of that Falstaff." But there's no opportunity to do so. The sheriff now is knocking at the door, and this is the second time that the scene is interrupted by an outsider. And the sheriff is looking for Falstaff, and Prince Hal covers for him at the end of the play. He covers for him. Everyone goes and hides essentially. Prince Hal speaks to the sheriff, says, "Yeah, I know. I'll make sure that Falstaff answers for the robbery, because that's what the sheriff's there for. Falstaff's a easy guy to recognize. Everyone kind of can. He's got a shape that stands out." But Prince Hal covers for him one last time here, or one more time here, and sends the sheriff away. But by this point, interestingly, Falstaff has fallen asleep. He's drunk, he's been drinking, he's tired, it's been a long night, and he falls asleep in the background. And when Prince Hal comes and points come and find him asleep, they play one more jest. They pick his pockets. They take some papers. He has nothing in them. He has no money. He has nothing of worth. But they pick his pockets and they take his papers, his receipts from his pocket. And so ends Act 2, but it nicely sets up that discourse between Prince Hal and Falstaff. That role play nicely sets up to the real conversation that's to come, that's to follow, when King Henry calls his son before him, and they actually do have that conversation. And that's the stuff of the next video lecture. All right, I'll see you then. Thank you.